Hello and welcome back to the channel. Now, we all know that the immigration system in Canada has been changing fast, especially in the last year. And lately, I've been getting a ton of messages asking about the recent Canada immigration updates. And I realized that sometimes people are not very sure of what those updates are. They just know that there have been updates. So I've put together this compilation of the most important changes and updates to Canada immigration in the last year or so. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. This video is a bit longer than my usual videos, but trust me, every minute is packed with valuable insights, and it applies to you whether you're applying for express entry, studying in Canada, or you're even looking for alternative immigration pathways. You'll find the latest updates right here on this video. Note that this is just for information purposes and it does not constitute immigration advice in any way. So, grab a notepad, get comfortable, and let's dive in. We're going to start with the updates regarding the visitor visa to work permit in Canada. This update was done around August of 2024. Here is the update.
Hey everyone, I know this recent announcement by Canada's immigration authorities on Canada visa to work permit has left many of you feeling confused, frustrated, and maybe even a little bit scared. It was a shock for all of us when on August 28, 2024, Canada announced the end of the policy allowing visitors to apply for work permits while living in Canada. A lot of people were very hopeful of being able to convert their Canada visitor visas to work permit before February 2025. If you or someone you know is affected by this, I want you to know that it is well. Canada is on a roll. I don't know how to explain what is happening. I just don't know. It's like they have this arsenal of things they want to do, and they are just firing it one after the other. Minister Miller has also announced his intention to consider changes in permanent residence levels to Canada in coming years. He even hinted that there are more measures coming. This is not the end. Okay, it is well. We are watching. In this video, we're going to break down exactly what is happening, why the government made this decision, and most importantly, what you can do next. Let's start by understanding why this happened in the first place. The policy was initially introduced during the height of the pandemic to help visitors who were stuck in Canada due to travel restrictions. It was a lifeline, but over time, it became a loophole for some unscrupulous people to take advantage of others. Personally, I think that this has been the most abused Canada policy so far. Did you know that there were agents advising people that they could change the visit visa to work permit at the port of entry? There were so many bad eggs that went as far as selling NMIs for as much as $35,000. And guess what? Sometimes those NMIs were even fake, which is sad. The United Nations even called Canada's temporary worker program a breeding ground for slavery. I feel that that was actually the last straw. The government just had to step in and shut it down to protect the integrity of the system and to prevent further exploitation of you and the system as well. But I get it. Knowing the reason doesn't make this any less painful, especially if you have plans that are now up in the air. You might be feeling lost, wondering what's next. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about here. First off, let's talk about those of you who are already in Canada on a visitor's visa. This change might feel like a huge roadblock, but here are some actionable steps that you can take. Well, before I tell you what these steps are, I want you to always have the most updated information regarding Canada immigration. And you can do that by subscribing to this channel and turning on the notification bell so you're always updated. That is the wisest action you can take right now. Okay, moving on. The first thing I want to say is that people can still say all sorts of things and give all sorts of advice, but please be careful and be sure that you are on the side of the law at all times. And the reason I say this is because I've heard that even with the termination of this policy, there are some significant loopholes that remain. For instance, visitors can still get an NMIA and apply for a work permit by engaging in a process known as flag pulling, where they travel to the Canada-US border to change their status. If this is still possible, then it renders this policy's termination almost useless, as visitors continue to find ways to obtain work permits without leaving the country. I have not dug deep into this yet, but I have heard that it is a loophole to this policy. If it is true, then the government's failure to address this issue reflects a trend of making policies in a hurry without considering everything. But I may be ahead of myself here, and the government may address it soon. Whichever ways, let's see how this goes. Now, these are some options that I would suggest for you. Number one, explore other visa options. If you're still interested in working in Canada, you may need to return to your home country and apply for a work permit from there if you have the job offer and LMI. If you don't, then you need to look into other programs that align with your own eligibility requirements and your own circumstances. We'll talk about that in a bit. Number two, study permit. Consider switching your visitor visa to a study permit. Studying in Canada not only gives you the chance to work part-time during your studies, but it also opens the door to post-graduation work permits and even permanent residency later on. For this, since you're in Canada, you can just walk into a school here and see what options might be open in terms of programs that you can study. You still need to apply for the study permit and meet all the eligibility requirements, including the proof of funds requirements. 3, look into the Provincial Nominee Program, or the PNP. Some provinces have streams that allow you to apply for a work permit or permanent residency directly, especially if you have ties to the province or a job offer. Research the specific requirements for the province that you're in, and you can also check out this link here, as this province has a program like this at the very moment. You don't have to be tied to the province where you are. Remember that if another province has a program like the Rural Northern Immigration Program or the AIPP, you can always check out those provinces and see how you can qualify for their programs. You are not tied to whichever province you are right now. But if you're on a visitor visa, remember that you need to do all of this within 6 months of your visit visa, or if you must and your visit visa is expiring, please extend it. Do not be in Canada on an expired visit visa. That is my candid advice. Number 4, if you are engaged to be married, this might be the time to tie the knot, especially if your better half is a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident. Number 5, stay informed. The immigration landscape in Canada is constantly changing. Keep up with the latest updates and be ready to adapt your plans as new opportunities arise. Now, for those of you who have a visitor visa, but you haven't traveled yet, here is what I think you can do. 1, reevaluate your plans and explore other visa types. Before you travel, consider your options. If your goal was to work in Canada, you now need a job offer and to apply for a work permit from outside Canada. Research potential employers and job opportunities before making any decisions. Also, let me remind you about the caregiver program that is opening soon. That could be an option for you. You can check out my video in this channel where I talked about it. I will link that video in the description as well. You may want to complete the IELTS. You need a minimum of CLB4, get trained in caregiving, and also have relevant work experience. This program requires a job offer in Canada, so you might want to start sending in your CV and applications to relevant openings. If you need help with CV or cover letter, please email canadajobcv@yahoo.com. Tell them you are from Shea Bassi and you get a 10% discount. They can make professional CVs and cover letters for you because you don't want to be applying to these jobs, CVs and cover letters that are not professional and that are not in the Canadian format. That's the first thing you need to do, or you need to explore other options. Number 2 advice for you is that you can consider deferring your travel. If you're unsure about your next steps, it might be wise to hold off on traveling until you have a clearer path forward. You don't want to end up in Canada with limited options. Your visa allows you to travel anytime before it expires, and it allows multiple entry. And hey, if you don't use the visa, you will not be penalized. So don't feel that you're under any pressure to travel. You are not. Now, and for those of you who were planning to get a visitor visa with the intention of applying for a work permit once you get to Canada, here are the things I think that you should know. Number one, don't apply for a visitor visa for work purposes. With this policy change, applying for a visitor visa with the intention of working is no longer viable. Instead, look directly into work visa options from your home country. Number two, consider alternative pathways. Explore the Express Entry Program, studying in Canada, or even the provincial nomination programs. Each has its own set of criteria, but they can lead to both work opportunities and permanent residency in Canada. On this channel, I have made videos and live sessions on all of this. So subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and browse through the channel to see all those videos and get yourself ready. 3, plan strategically. If you're serious about moving to Canada, take the time to plan your pathway carefully. Understand the requirements and choose the visa that best aligns with your goals. Now, let's talk about something that might be crossing your mind, and that is making a refugee claim in Canada. Whether you're already here on a visitor visa or you are planning to come to Canada on a visitor visa. I want to be clear about this. Refugee claims are meant for those who genuinely fear persecution in their home country. It is not a loophole for those who are affected by this policy change, and making a fake claim can have serious consequences, including being banned from entering Canada in the future. I am not going to talk much about seeking asylum in Canada, especially because there are various schools of thoughts on this issue. And it will require a lot more expansive conversation, so we can do that on another video. However, if you're in a situation where you feel that your safety is at risk, that's a different conversation, and you should seek legal advice immediately. But if your goal is to stay in Canada for work, there are other more appropriate channels to explore, like I've talked about earlier. Now, I want to reassure you that there are some of you who are not affected by this policy change. For example, if you're the spouse of a master's, PhD student, or someone in a professional program in Canada, and you're in Canada on a visitor visa, you can still apply for a spousal open work permit, that's the SOWP, through either flag polling or by applying from within Canada. This policy change doesn't impact you or anyone on an open work permit. If there are other classes of people that are not affected by this, I will update you as soon as I have more clarity. But for now, those on the open work permit are not affected by this policy. All in all, the key takeaway here is to stay informed. Understand the specifics of your own situation and take appropriate action. I know this is a tough time, and I truly empathize with what you're going through, especially if you are affected by this. But there's hope, and there are still plenty of opportunities to pursue your dream of living and working in Canada.
This next change was made in September of 2024, and this one was very extensive because there were changes to work permit, there were changes to some aspects of international studies in Canada, there were changes to the language requirements for the post-graduation work permit, which was never there before, and there were some changes regarding making asylum claims in Canada. This video talks about all of those changes and what to do if you're affected.
Canada just announced a massive change to its immigration system, and it's going to affect thousands of people who thought they had their futures secured. If you're planning to come to Canada soon, or you're already here on a temporary visa, whether it's a work permit or a study visa, you need to hear this. So pull your chair and let's go through this together. All right, so there's been a huge announcement that is shaking up the whole Canada immigration scene, especially if you're a temporary resident, that is an international student or someone hoping to work in Canada. I know it can feel overwhelming when rules change like this, and it's happening quite a bit lately in Canada. But don't worry, I'm going to break it all down step by step so you know exactly what's going on and what it means for you. Canada has always been super welcoming to people from all over the world. Canada has seen a huge influx of international students and temporary workers, especially in the last few years. And while that has been great for the economy and for bringing in talent, There's now a problem. It's just too much and too fast. The Canadian government has decided to scale things back a little. So that means that there's likely to be fewer spots for international students and stricter rules when it comes to work permits, as well as stricter rules for employers that employ workers to work in Canada. And honestly, this is happening because the labor market is shifting, and Canada is dealing with some pretty big economic challenges. So if you're a student planning to come here, or you're already studying, or if you're working or thinking about applying for a work permit, these changes could directly impact you. So please pay attention. Now let's dive into the specifics of what is changing and what you need to do to navigate it if you're affected. The government announced that by 2026, they want to reduce the number of temporary residents from 6.5% of the population to only 5%. And that is a huge cut. It's big, and here's how they're planning to do it.
So simply put, the international student cap is here to stay. Over the next 3 years, and I think this is important, we expect these changes to yield approximately 300,000 fewer study permits.
Now, from that clip that you just watched, we have heard that the number of international study permits is going to be reduced. For 2025, the cap is being lowered by 5% from 485,000 to 437,000. That means that fewer new international students will be able to come to Canada. If you're planning to apply to study in Canada in the next couple of years, you will need to move quickly and make sure that your application is airtight. Make sure that you are ticking all the boxes, crossing your T's, dotting your I's in your study permit application. Plus, for those of you looking at post-graduation work permits after you graduate, there's also changes that affect you.
A Canadian language benchmark, CLB, level 7 for university graduates and CLB 5 for college graduates will be required for anyone applying for post-graduation work permit on or after November 1st of 2024. We know that people that can speak the language are better equipped to succeed in Canadian society. This is a more stringent requirement that I think is very important if we are going to continue the successful story of integration of some of these people into Canadian society.
So from the video we also watched, the second thing that is changing is that there will be tighter post-graduation work permit rules. Starting November 2024, the government is introducing stricter language proficiency requirements. If you're applying for a post-graduation work permit or PGWP, you will now need to meet a minimum Canadian language benchmark or CLB level. University grads need a level 7 and college grads need a level 5. This is completely new. And trust me, I think it's completely unnecessary. Because I mean, these people just graduated from schools in Canada and they were taught in English. How does them doing the language exam help anything? Results that will expire in 2 years and they have to take another one for PR. This one is completely off. I really don't see the point of the government asking for PGWP for people who had already gotten admission into schools, completed studying in Canada in English. I can understand them doing English exam for PR, but for PGWP, it is completely off and I don't get it. Because the truth is that they would have to do another English language test for PR. But according to the minister, the idea is to make sure that you're better prepared for the workforce and you can transition more easily to permanent residency. But he's forgetting that these international students are already working in Canada. Remember, they can work part-time, so they're already integrated into the workforce. How is it that they could already work as students? And now when it is time to transition to PGWP, you are saying that they need to get ready by, taking the English exam. Was it not English they were speaking before in the jobs they were doing? I mean, can you guys see my thinking pattern here? Or what do you think? Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are about this English language requirement for applying for PGWP.
Fourth, for prospective students applying on or after November 1st, post-graduation work permit eligibility will depend on the level of study. Graduates from bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degree programs will remain eligible for a work permit up to 3 years. These graduates are more likely to acquire transferable knowledge and skills and be able to adapt to changing economic circumstances over the long term.
In addition, if you listened well, you heard that only students from programs linked to jobs that are in long-term shortage will be eligible for the full 3-year PGWP. I guess the question you're asking is, what are those long-term shortage jobs? We will talk about that in detail in another video, but it's likely trades, healthcare, and construction, plus probably others in agriculture and technology. That is something we have to talk about in detail in another video, but these are likely the types of jobs that the minister is referring to. There are also changes coming for spouses of foreign students and workers.
In the near future, we'll also take further measures to restrict eligibility to spousal open work permits. The fifth measure that I'm announcing today will be to further limit work permit eligibility to spouses of students in doctoral and certain master's select professional programs and certain pilot programs. And over the next 3 years, we expect that measure and these changes to yield approximately 50,000 fewer work permits for the spouses of students groups.
Later this year, spouses of master's degree students will only be able to get a work permit if the program is at least 16 months long. And for spouses of temporary foreign workers, they will only get a permit.
Also be limiting work permit eligibility to include only spouses of highly skilled, specialized workers such as C-suite executives, scientists, engineers, lawyers, professors, and technicians, or of workers in sectors where there are those key labor shortages. Spouses of workers in critical sectors like healthcare, construction will also obviously continue to be eligible for those work permits.
This means that if you were hoping to bring your spouse along and have them work, you will need to double check these new rules before making plans. And since this starts later this year, if your spouse wants to apply, please start their application ASAP. I always say anything about Canada is fast. Do fast before the policy changes. And it's funny because changes to spousal open work permits was just done recently in March of 2024, when only the spouses of masters and PhD students can apply for spousal open work permit. And even though this was painful for those who are not masters or PhD students or those other bachelor programs, it was okay. We have started to accept it. And now the government is pulling the rug under our feet again and saying that your master's program have to be 16 months for your spouse to be able to get the spousal open work permit. Previously, they announced that even if your master's program was only 1 year, you could get that 3 year of PGWP, and your spouse could, of course, apply for spousal open work permit. But with these changes, by the time you're applying for a master's program, you need to try and check that it is one that is 16 months long if you want to get some of these other benefits that accrue to master's students. The government is also dealing with a rise in asylum claims. Canada is getting more asylum applications than before. And to manage this, they are planning to improve how the claims are processed and how they are reviewing the decisions concerning asylum claims so that they can reduce frauds.
And again, there are a number of measures that we need to take to make sure that when asylum seekers come to this country, they get due process, but that there is no abuse in the system. And it is incumbent on the federal government to act when it controls the levers, particularly at the border.
So apparently, they've noticed that there's lots of frauds when it comes to asylum seekers, and there will be changes in that as well. So these are the announcements made on September 18, 2024, and they are very serious announcements indeed. Now, what does all of this mean for you? Basically, if you are thinking about coming to Canada or you are already here, please know that the landscape is changing. The immigration landscape is changing. You can see it, you can smell it, you can feel it. We have been getting back-to-back immigration changes since the beginning of this year. Since last year, it's been one change to another, with the government tightening restrictions, especially when it comes to international students and foreign workers in Canada. And as the minister had said, there will be more announcements on November 1st, and these announcements would also apply permanent resident applications as well. The minister refused to give any details, so I guess we have to wait for him to make his announcements. I think it's October or November. The way Canada immigration is changing, I doubt that it will ever be the same again. It will not be the same. So please, you're going to have to pay attention to these changes if you're an international student or a foreign worker, or you are the spouse of an international student, or you are planning to even come to Canada to study or maybe to work. It is so important that you keep abreast of these changes, because the changes are so regular that sometimes you can even lose sight of what has changed and what hasn't changed. So try and subscribe to this channel or to any other channel that you trust so that you can stay abreast of these immigration news as they come. I really wish I had more to say to you, but it is what it is. And when life gives you lemons, you try and make lemonade. Even though making lemonade in this case is really getting harder and harder. Now, Minister Macmillan also said it himself. Not everyone who wants to come to Canada will be able to come.
And as I said in French, it is a privilege to come to Canada. It is not a right.
That's a harsh reality. But it is important to understand that the changes being made are aimed at preserving the integrity of the system and making it sustainable in the long run. Or at least that's what the minister said. It's all about making a balance, right? welcoming newcomers, but ensuring that the Canadian economy and the society can actually support these newcomers. We have all heard the news: rising cost of living, accommodation problems, people not being able to get rent, jobs they are not finding. So all of these things, the people are crying, and the Canadian government has actually heard it. And even though they agree that immigration is good for Canada, they are not stopping immigration. Canada is just slowing things down a bit so that they can put their house in order. And even though I know that this affects you negatively, I think that somehow I see the point in them making some of these changes. Not all of them. There are some that I think are unnecessary. But Canada really does need to do something about improving not just immigration, but the system in terms of those who land in Canada as international students, as temporary residents, or even permanent residents. How do they settle down? And how do they live the life that they came to Canada to actually live? I think that's what the government is trying to pay attention to. So you spoke, people have talked, and the government has listened. Or that's what I think. So while it might seem like the door is closing a little, it's really more about making sure that those who do come have the best chance to succeed. So the new policy states that the Canadian government is tightening the rules for international students and foreign workers. Fewer study permits will be issued starting in 2025, and stricter language requirements will come into play for those looking to work after they graduate. Work permits for spouses are going to be harder to get, and there's a big focus on ensuring that asylum seekers and temporary residents are real and can contribute to the economy. Now, if you look at what has happened in the UK and also in Australia in the last year or so, you would see something very similar. The UK has done something similar, so has Australia, and Canada has followed suit. So it seems like these governments are having a meeting, or at least are looking at immigration in the same way. And if you're on the other side, it will be good for you to, in as much as you're considering how this affects you, to look at what could have prompted this. Is this even necessary? And you can be able to imagine what other changes could come in the future. And if you do want to come to Canada, please make haste, because these immigration policies are changing so fast and so frequently that if you qualify for any route at all, please start working on it as soon as you can. You need to make hay while the sun shines. And I've been saying this like forever. So to stay informed, make sure you're subscribed to learn more of what you need to know. We will talk more in later videos about some of these changes. But in the meantime, I want you to keep your hopes on. I want you to stay positive. I want you to trust God. And if there were some things that were delaying you in terms of applying for your study permit or work permit, or maybe your permanent residence, go and tighten those things. If you needed to get an English language test, or you need to do your ECA, that's your education credential, or if you're still thinking about making up your mind, this is the time to actually make up your mind and start making a move this year.
This next immigration announcement was made around October of 2024, and it was targeted at the post-graduation work permit of international students in Canada. This was really tough and a big change, because previously, after graduation, you could just go ahead to apply for a PGWP. It doesn't matter what you studied, and you didn't need an English exam. But the government's new rule indicates that you not only need to do an English exam, but there's also a field of study requirement for certain categories of international students. And this video is going to give details of all of that.
So the last 1 year or so has been very chaotic for Canada international students, especially with one announcement after another targeted at international students. First of all, there was an increase in the proof of living funds. Then there was a cap on the number of international students that can study in Canada. Then there was a change in the spousal open work permit, and on and on. The last couple of weeks, the Minister of Immigration announced yet another set of changes to international students in Canada, as well as temporary residents. Now, those changes affected post-graduation work permit eligibility. Previously, no matter what level of studies you came to do in Canada or what program you came to study, you were eligible for a PGWP as long as you went to a PGWP eligible school, you applied on time, and you completed a program that was at least 8 months. This was great for a lot of international students because it was almost a given that you would get the PGWP after studying in Canada. The PGWP gave students time to get jobs and get the work experience that will qualify them for permanent residence in Canada. Great, everything was going great until a couple of weeks ago when the minister announced that there would be some changes to the PGWP. So there were language requirement changes, there was also field of study changes. And the minister insinuated in that announcement that not everybody would be able to get PGWP anymore. Thankfully, IRCC has now clarified the field of study requirements for those who are to get PGWP. So all in all, they are trying to say that not all programs of study will get PGWP anymore. It's a very devastating announcement, very devastating policy change, because lots of people just even started studying in Canada just this September, and they might be studying in fields that are not qualified for PGWP anymore. Anyway, enough of me talking. Let me show you some of the changes that affect you if you're an international student in Canada or if you're coming to study in Canada. The changes have been divided to before November 1st of 2024 and after November 1st of 2024. I'm going to leave the link to this page in the description so you can go ahead and see the details. So on this page, we're looking at what hasn't changed. We're looking at the new eligibility requirements in terms of language requirements and field of study requirements. So in terms of what hasn't changed, I mean, the general and physical location eligibility requirements don't change even after November 1st. Yeah, you need to complete a study program at a PGWP eligible DLI. You need to apply like 180 days at most after you study. You need to have completed a program that is at least 8 months in length, that's 8 months duration. And then some of the other requirements are that the length of your program, like I said before, it has to be in a DLI and it has to be within that 180 days of finishing your program. Now, regarding the new eligibility requirements, if you submitted your study permit application before November 1st, there are some requirements and it's different from those who submitted study permit after November 1st. So if you submitted your study permit application before November 1st and you're applying for a PGWP after November 1st of 2024, you must also meet the new requirements that apply to your situation. So this is for all those who submitted their study permit application before November 1st, or you're applying for the PGWP on or after November 1st. So this would apply to people who probably are already in Canada and are going to be applying for their PGWP after November 1st. So if you're still studying and you haven't finished studying, but you definitely applied for study permit before November 1st, this would apply to you. So first of all, if you graduated with a bachelor's degree, master's degree, or doctoral degree from a university, there are now language requirements. The minister also mentioned this in the last announcement. So you must prove your language abilities. You must score at least a CLB 7 and an LCLC 7 in French in all the 4 language areas. If you graduated in any other university program that is not a bachelor's, a master's, or a doctoral degree, you must prove your English or French language skills with a CLB 7 in English or NCLC 7 in French in all 4 languages. If you graduated from a college program, however, or any other programs that is not a bachelor's, a master's, or university program or a PhD, so if you did a diploma, advanced diploma, postgraduate certificate, you must prove your English or French language skills with a minimum level of CLB 5 and LCLC 5 in French language in all the 4 areas. Now, previously, there was no requirement for English language. If you wanted to apply for a PGWP, you were not required to have that English language. So I've done IELTS or SOWP or the French exam. You were not even required to have had a job. Yeah, so you just finish, you graduate, and you apply. But now you have to do the English language test. So it is advisable that you do it while you're studying. So in the last couple of months before you finish studying, I would advise that you start studying for your language test. Now, talking about those who graduated from college, even though the requirement is a CLB 5, I would advise you to go beyond this, because for you to create a profile in the Express Entry, you need a CLB 7. Yeah, so this is just for PGWP, but if you wanted to also use this for Express Entry, please try and score at least a CLB 7 or above so that you can also use it for permanent residence application. However, the English language test only lasts for 2 years, so it has a 2-year shelf life. So you need to also put that in mind. Yeah. So if you had a 3-year PGWP and you feel that, okay, you know what, I will not be able to apply for PR before then I guess you can score a CLB 5 if you went to college, but try and score much more than that. Now, if you submitted your study permit application on or after November 1st, you also meet the new requirements that apply to your situation to be eligible for a PGWP. So the same thing. If you submit your study permit, so if you're submitting a study permit after November 1st, you must also meet new requirements, okay, for you to be eligible for a PGWP. If you graduated from a university's bachelor's degree, master's, same as above, you still need to meet those language requirements. But this time around, you also meet a field of study requirement. All fields of study are eligible. There is no additional field of study requirements. Yeah, so I need to stress that there's no field of study requirement. All fields of study are eligible. There's no additional field of study requirement if you submit your study permit application on November 1st or after November 1st. You must also meet the new requirements that apply to your situation. If you graduated from any other university program, same as above, you must graduate in an eligible field of study. So all those who are going to be submitting a study permit application after November 1st, if you're coming to study a bachelor's, master's, or PhD, you still need to meet all the requirements we talked about, but you don't need to meet the field of study requirements, okay? If you are graduating from any other university program, you must also prove your English language, but this time around, you're going to meet a field of study requirement. So you must graduate in an eligible field of study. If you are graduating from a college program or any other program that is not a bachelor's, master's, or PhD, you must meet the CLB 5 of English, like we said before. You must also graduate in an eligible field of study. So invariably, if you've submitted your application, if you're in Canada already, yeah, then you are the previous things we talked about in terms of eligibility. These ones here are what apply to you. If you are submitting your study permit application on or after November 1st, then there are new requirements. So please, if you are trying to submit a study permit application and you know that you're not coming to study in any of these eligible fields of study, and you're not doing a bachelor's, a master's, or a PhD, you need to try and submit your application before November 1st. Or else you would need to have studied in one of these fields of study that we're going to be looking at. Now, when it comes to the CLB 7, of course, we all know the CLB, you need to, for English language, you need to score at least 6 in all of the, in all of the areas of language, as reading, writing, listening, and speaking, and your test results must be less than 2 years old when you submit your application. Now, in terms of English, you can do the English language test, which is SOWP. You can do the IELTS. And for French, you can do the TEF Canada or the TCF Canada. Canada is also now taking the PTE core option. So there's this PTE exam, Pearson test of English. As long as you do the PTE core option, Canada also accepts it. Now let's go to this field of study requirement. Field of study would affect those who are submitting study permit application after November 1st, and also those who did not who went to college or are doing a program that's not a bachelor's, a master's, or a PhD. Now, if your study program has a field of study requirement, you must graduate from a program linked to certain occupations in long-term shortage. So it seems like what Canada has done is to kind of categorize all fields of study into those in long-term shortage and those that are not in long-term shortage. And they are saying that, they've divided the long-term shortage into 5 broad categories. And just looking at this, just at a glance, these are the areas, the category-based jobs, those new category-based jobs that IRCC just started. These are all the programs: agriculture, healthcare, STEM programs, trades, and transport. So, if you are not able to submit your application before November 1st and you really want to come study in Canada, you might want to get another admission before you come to study. So let's take a look at some of these programs. There are lots of them. So I would urge you to go through. You can see there's up to page 97. So Canada has put different NOC codes, different field of study. They've also put the title of the program, as well as the title of the job. So when it comes to agriculture, we have crop production, we have apiculture, animal training, and all of that. And it goes on and on. Let's look at for healthcare. Let's see if we can break it down and look at it one by one. Okay, so looking at different areas of study. So again, I've tried to go through the pages so that there's lots of it. So it's not like you're limited, but in terms of broad ranges, it's transportation, trades, STEM programs, that's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. There's healthcare, agriculture, and agri-food. Yeah, so I'm going to leave the link down. So I don't want you to be asking, can I do animal science? Can I do nursing? Just go through this. depending on whether you're under healthcare or whether you're education, teaching of individuals with autism, it falls under healthcare. And then I was trying to see whether education is here. See, counselor education, school counseling and guidance services is under healthcare. And this is one reason why I don't want you to just make a decision without going through this list. Somebody that is a counselor of education would think that, oh, you know what, education is not there. But you can see, education is here. Special education and teaching is under healthcare. So please try and go through this. Human nutrition, genetics, there are lots of it here. And from what I can see, it seems like healthcare, as usual, healthcare like has the most, yeah, because it's very broad. Then of course there's transport, marine transporter, lots of it. Let's not waste time going through this. The link will be in the comments. I'm sure many other people have posted these links. You can just take your time and go through. And when you are applying to study in Canada, please try and find a way. I know that you might not qualify for this, especially maybe if you're an art student or you did business, but you need to find a way to do some of these programs. Or you can come to Canada to study your business program, and then when you're done, you can, if your school has some of these other programs, and since you studied there, if they can give you another program, you can do a back-to-back with another program, yeah? So personally, I think that you can still come to study a business program or whatever. If you can't qualify for any of this in these 5 categories, and then you can do a switch in your school. Remember that you need to do a switch within the same DLI, because if we're changing DLIs, you would have to apply for a new study permit. I mean, that's how Canada has made it. And previously, it wasn't like that. You could change your DLI, but I guess it is what it is. And also, there's this CIP code and title. Classification of Instructional Programs, CIP, is used to classify post-secondary education programs according to the field of study in Canada. So, I mean, Canada has given a lot of room for people to come to Canada to study and to be able to get permanent residence. I also came to Canada to study, and I had permanent residence, and it was like that, you know, and that's why Canada was preferred, because people also had the opportunity of not just getting world-class education, which is great, they also had the opportunity to work in Canada after study, and as well as to become permanent residents. But since Canada is saying, you know what, there's a field of study requirements after November 1st for those who went to program or who went to colleges or who are doing college programs or non-bachelor, master's, or PhD. I guess you walk around it. That's just what I think. So the link will be below. Don't be discouraged. Just make sure you take your time to read this page and understand the requirements. So like I said before, there are 2 categories of eligibility: those who are applying for study permit after November 1st and those who are applying for study permit before November 1st. There's also the dichotomy between those who are doing a bachelor's degree, master's, or doctoral in a university, and those who are doing other programs that is not any of these 3 in a university, as well as those who are studying in a college program, so diploma, advanced diploma, or a graduate certificate. There's that dichotomy. So find where you fit in, find your eligibility requirements, and then take it from there. It is what it is. No matter how much we hate it, no matter how much we're angry, we can't change this. It is what it is, unless we have to just work with it like that, okay?
So guys, there you have it. I don't know what your sentiment is at this time. Some of you might be very discouraged. Some people are more encouraged to go on. But what I can say is there's always a way around this. For all those fields of studies that we have mentioned previously, if you can come and study in any of those fields, then please do that, yeah? If you can get work experience, or you can be able to convince a visa officer that you qualify to study for any of those programs, please go ahead and come study for those programs. I'm sure you also know that the dynamics will change in terms of number of study visas that will be approved, number of admissions that you can get at the school. All of those dynamics will change, but as time goes on, we will see how things pan out, okay? Like I always say, if life gives you lemons, try and make lemonade. I know that this is not like the best announcement, but please, please, please keep your head up, trust in God, and there will definitely be a way for you.
This next announcement was made October 24th of 2024, and this time it was the Prime Minister as well as the Immigration Minister that made the announcement together. And basically, this one was basically cutting down immigration numbers for the next 3 years. That is 2024, 2025, and 2026. I think part of 2027. So Canada basically, because of the housing issues, the rising cost of living, and other issues in Canada, and also admitting that immigration may have been a little too much, they are now cutting down the numbers to make it manageable. And this video explains how they plan to do that for the next 3 years.
So on October 24th, Canada served us a hot pot of egusi soup, steaming hot. Apologies if you are not a Nigerian, go and Google what egusi soup is. They have been serving it to us over the last year anyway, so we are not so surprised again. Orishirishi policy changes. Anyway, when I tuned into the broadcast and I saw the Canada Prime Minister, I sat up because it had to be serious for the Prime Minister himself to be involved in making this announcement. So let's get into it. What's going on again with Canada immigration? And what does this mean for those of you that are hoping to immigrate to Canada, or even those that are already here in Canada on a temporary visa? Let's talk about what the announcements were, the implications of it, and how these changes could affect you. So Canada just shook up the immigration scene once again with a major announcement. And this isn't just any update because, like I said earlier, the Prime Minister himself made an appearance, which shows how seriously the government is taking this. They could not even wait till November 1st when we are expecting this update. So whether you are an international student, the spouse of an international student, a work permit holder, an aspiring work permit holder, or someone who is trying to get Canada permanent residency or PR, this is important for you. This is the Prime Minister starting the announcement here, talking about the importance of immigration to Canada.
Immigration is vital to our future. And as a federal government, we have to make sure that that pride, that faith in immigration is not undermined.
Now, what I want to say now is completely my opinion. No, it's my opinion. But if you watch the actual announcement on CPAC, which I'm going to be putting up throughout this video anyway, you can hear the political undertone. They could not disguise it at all. The Prime Minister spent more time talking about his political opponent when he was being questioned than actually agreeing to the fact that they have somehow totally screwed up immigration. Of course, some things have happened behind the scene, right? But first, let's listen to the Immigration Minister.
Indeed, immigration is indispensable, has been indispensable to the creation and the identity of this country, indispensable to its future. As mentioned in our recent history, it was key to increasing our gross domestic product.
Despite the fact that immigration is important in Canada, behind the scenes, Canada is facing growing public concern about its immigration levels, especially with housing shortages and economic challenges. It also suggests that the government might be feeling the heat from the public and upcoming elections. They are trying to find a way to please both sides. That's those who want fewer newcomers and those who recognize the benefits of immigration. First of all, housing is a massive concern. The government knows that Canada is facing a housing crisis, and many people are blaming immigration for making it worse. Just last year, there were reports about housing shortages, and with so many newcomers arriving, it's easy to see how the pressure has built up. Inflation has also been on the rise in Canada, and this has worried everyone. A poll was taken recently, and about 58% of Canadians believe that immigration numbers were just too high, which is a significant increase over the past 2 years. Many are worried about how the government is managing these newcomers and the strain on housing and public services. New immigrants were pointed to as the scapegoats and the ones that are causing these issues in Canada. These sentiments, I believe, have put pressure on Prime Minister Trudeau as he seeks re-election because the Liberals are actually falling out of favor with Canadians. Immigration has become a key topic with the opposition party, using it to challenge the Prime Minister's policies, particularly given the public's growing discontent with how the immigration system is being managed. I believe that this political pressure is what is shaping the current debate around Canada's immigration future. So the government has announced a plan that will pause population growth in the short term to achieve a well-managed, sustainable growth in the long term.
I'll cut straight to the chase when it comes to permanent immigration targets. This plan is probably the first of its kind insofar as it integrates and responds to a lot of criticisms that we've received in the past. That this plan that we table as a statutory matter on November 1st only talks about permanent residency. This plan this year gives a better snapshot for people to look at total population growth and the growth of temporary residents, as well as the measures that we're putting into place to reduce those populations over the next few years. When it comes to Canada's permanent immigration targets and aligning them to our economic needs, I'm here to announce and confirm that the current plan reduces next year's projections from 500,000 permanent residents to 195,000, a net reduction of 105,000 permanent residents immediately in 2025. After that, in 2026, a progression down to 380 to stabilize the numbers at 365 in 2027.
They will do this by reducing the number of permanent resident admissions by a whopping 105,000 in 2025. That is a big shift from what they previously planned. Because it wasn't long ago that Minister Miller announced the new higher immigration levels for 2024 to 2026. And now those same levels are being cut short by 20%. Okay, my blood is too hot. Let's break it down step by step. The first thing I want you to know is that for the first time ever, the levels plan includes controlled targets for temporary residents, specifically international students and foreign workers, as well as for permanent residents. Usually, these immigration level plans will just target permanent residents. But I guess that's another thing that has changed. The new immigration plans will reduce immigration by 105,000 people in 2025 compared to what was originally expected. It will focus more on people that are already living in Canada. By 2025, over 40% of permanent residents will be those who are already here as temporary residents.
Is the need to focus on people that are already here. It means that consistent with our plan, over 40% of permanent residents will come from the temporary residents that are already in Canada. These people are a young labor pool. They're skilled. They're here. They've begun their process of integration. And it doesn't place the additional demands on the housing, healthcare, and social services that we see with someone that comes directly from another country.
In other words, the government is focusing on transitioning those that are already here, like international students and workers, into permanent residency. If you're in that boat, this could be an opportunity. And I have always been saying it forever that Canada should look to people that are already in the country waiting to become permanent residents. The thing is in their Sokoto, and they are looking for it in Sokoto. So this is some good news, in my opinion, especially since studies show that people with experience in Canada tend to do well in the long term. These are skilled and educated people who are already here and will not cause further strain on housing or put too much pressure on social services, as echoed by the Prime Minister here.
It makes sense. We have a large pool. There are ways to integrate that highly talented pool into the permanent residency population.
More changes will be made to immigration programs to make it easier for workers already in Canada to become permanent residents, especially in areas like healthcare and trades, where we need workers the most. By 2027, around 62% of all new permanent residents will come through these economic immigration programs in important fields like health and trades. So, in summary, permanent residence numbers will be reduced from 500,000 to 395,000 in 2025 across all classes of economic immigration. And it will reduce to 380,000 in 2026 and 365,000 in 2027. And guys, if you compare it to the numbers that were announced earlier by the immigration number, you will see that these are really massive cuts. Now, let's talk about temporary residents. Remember that in September, Canada announced some reduction measures for temporary residents. So currently, in specific terms, we will see Canada's temporary population decline to about 445,901 in 2025, 445,662 in 2026, followed by a modest increase of 17,439 in 2027.
Are expected to result in a reduction of Canada's temporary resident population of 445,000 in 2025, an additional 445,000 in 2026, and perhaps a modest increase of 17 in 2027. Those are the numbers that we are factoring in as we look at the impact on the need to build housing units, but also the ones we look at when we look at the overall mix and the plan to reduce the temporary resident population from 7 to 5%.
For those on or that are considering the temporary foreign worker program, note that the government is slashing the number of temporary workers allowed into the country, especially for low-wage jobs. And on top of that, wages for high-wage jobs will rise by 20% for you to qualify. I know this all sounds complicated and high-handed, but I just hope that you are getting it. But before we go on, I want to do a quick shout out to the amazing members of this channel. Thank you so much for your support. If you're new here, consider joining the membership. We've got tons of valuable members-only content about Canada immigration that are coming up. So click the join button just below to join. Moving on. So the government says that they are listening to Canadians.
It reflects the fact that we have and we will continue to listen to Canadians. That's something that's important because the people standing behind me today are people that have been speaking to their constituents, have been speaking to economists, have been speaking to universities and institutions, and listening to their own families. And they've said consistently that while we are still and continue to be an open country, that volume that we have put forward is something that is of concern. And indeed, the latest Environics poll says as much.
People want more control over immigration numbers, especially with concerns about whether the country can even sustain more people given the housing crisis and pressures on public services. This announcement is the government's way of showing that they are actually taking these concerns seriously. But at the same time, it's worth noting that not all of Canada's issues can be blamed on immigration. Yes, immigration has contributed to housing shortages, but it's not the sole reason. From my perspective, it's important to recognize that while immigration plays a role in some of these challenges, it's unfair to place the entire blame entirely on newcomers. Canada's economy has benefited from immigration for decades. Cutting back too much could also lead to a shortage of skilled workers, which could slow economic growth in the long term. So honestly, I am still digesting this news, and I hope that these new plans will actually help the issues in the country, like housing, jobs, and inflation. We will wait and see. If you're an international student, a work permit holder, or someone who is hoping to apply for permanent residence, now is the time to be proactive. But proactive, Bawul, you ask, proactive in every way. With these changes, things could get a bit tougher to get into Canada. But for students and workers, there's also the opportunity since the government is prioritizing those that are already here in Canada. So make sure you know your options and that you continue to stay informed. Stay tuned to this channel and I will keep you updated on the latest immigration news and how you can navigate any changes.
This one is the last one on this series, and this announcement was made January of 2025, and it was directed at the spousal open work permit of the spouses for international students as well as the spouses for foreign workers. There's also a part of this announcement that also affects the children of foreign workers with regards to getting an open work permit. I think that, starting the year 2025 with this kind of announcement, it wasn't a very nice thing because, it threw a lot of people off balance with regards to the fact that their spouses would not be eligible for a spousal open work permit and all the other things that were tied to this announcement. And obviously, getting into Canada, not just as a student, but even as a worker or a spouse of an international student, is becoming harder because Canada is making the immigration more difficult. But I'm going to leave you to watch the video to get the details of what this immigration announcement entails. Okay, I'm sure you already heard that Canada has done it again. This time they made an announcement focusing on the spouses and even the children of international students and foreign workers. Let's talk about what this policy change is to spousal open work permits in 2025. We'll also talk about who is affected and what you need to do if you're affected. Trust me, you don't want to miss this video. First of all, let's set the stage. Truly, for years, Canada has been one of the most family-friendly destinations for international students and foreign workers. The spousal open work permits was a lifeline that allowed spouses of international students and foreign workers to work while supporting their spouses and families in Canada. It was a win-win. Families loved it. Families stayed united, they stayed together, and the Canadian economy benefited from a larger labor force. But come January 21st, 2025, things are changing. And not everyone is happy about this change. And the reason is because
These new rules are much stricter, and it also limits who qualifies for a spousal open work permit. Let's unpack what's happening and what it means for you. So, first of all, what is changing? Starting January 21st, only certain spouses of international students and foreign workers will qualify for a spousal open work permit. So generally, the spousal open work permit is an open work permit that is given to spouses of these international students and foreign workers and enables them to work full-time anywhere in Canada while their spouse is either studying or working. The eligibility is now tied to certain specific criteria. Previously, no matter what you were studying in Canada or the level, your spouse qualified for the spousal open work permit, but now they must meet certain specific criteria, or you as the international student must meet certain specific criteria before your spouse is eligible to apply for that spousal open work permit. And if they are not eligible, of course, that means that your spouse cannot come to Canada to work while you study or while you are a foreign worker in Canada. So for international students, your spouse only qualifies if the student is enrolled in a master's degree program that is lasting at least 16 months or longer. Secondly, doctoral programs, that is PhDs, or select professional or eligible programs. RCC hasn't dropped the full list as at the time of making this video, so please keep an eye out for that. Then for foreign workers, spouses can qualify if the worker is employed in either Tier 0 or Tier 1 occupations, so jobs like senior managers, specialized professionals, and those with advanced skills. Also, your spouse will qualify if you are employed in some select Tier 2 or Tier 3 jobs in industries facing labor shortages like healthcare, construction, education, and even the military. But for foreign workers, there's also a catch. The foreign worker must have at least 16 months left on their work permit when their spouse applies. And that applies to only foreign workers and not international students. Unfortunately, dependent children of foreign workers are no longer eligible for open work permits. That's a tough pill to swallow for many families. Now you might be wondering why this is happening and how it even helps Canada, right? Well, the government is trying to better align immigration with labor market needs and to reduce the strain on the system. Canada's population is growing really fast thanks to immigration, and the system is feeling the pressure. So by narrowing this eligibility, the government is essentially trying to control how many people can work through this pathway. Let me know what you think. Just drop your thoughts in the comments. Now, if you already have a spousal open work permit, it is still valid until it expires. If you are the spouse of an international student and your current work permit expires before your spouse completes their studies, you can still renew your work permit. Just remember that you will need to meet the same criteria that you originally applied under, and the renewal can go beyond the length of the principal applicant's study or work permit. This is really great for families and spouses that are already in Canada and have spousal open work permits already. But for new applicants, the road ahead is a lot more narrower and harder. There are exceptions to the rules, of course. Not everyone is affected by these changes. Spouses of workers covered by free trade agreements and those transitioning to permanent residency are not affected. Please note that if you or your family members no longer qualify for a spousal open work permit, you can still apply for other types of work permits for them. This might be a bit harder, but it is still something to consider. If you're affected by this policy change, first and foremost, mark your calendar. It's January 21st. That's when the new rules would start. And that's also when the government will release the full list of eligible programs and occupations. Make sure you bookmark the RCC website or follow reputable immigration news sources to stay updated. If you're already in Canada or you're planning to come soon, evaluate your timelines. Does your work permit or study permit give you enough time to meet the new requirements? If not, consider applying or renewing before January 21st. This is especially crucial for spouses who have the intention of applying for an open work permit. And most importantly, don't lose hope. Canada offers various work permit options, and you might qualify under a different program. Consulting with a licensed immigration consultant or a lawyer can help you figure out your next steps. It's getting real, guys. The changes are happening fast, whether we like it or not. Families who were once eligible may now have to change their plans. But with the right information and planning, you can still achieve your goals. I believe you can. So even though we cannot stop Canada from making all these policy changes or from changing one rule or the other or from basically shifting the goalpost after the match has started, what we can do is to stay hopeful and to try and see how we can work with the new immigration policies. Canada is actually not against international students or even foreign workers. Canada is not against you. Just be aware that they are just trying to work to make sure that immigration is aligning with all the other things regarding Canada, especially the services, the jobs available, and the living conditions for Canadians, permanent residents, and even you, the temporary residents. Just keep that in mind anytime you hear this news update and anytime you review them. One thing I want you to remember though, immigration is a journey. It's not always easy, but it's always worth it. And it's great for you to be always aware of what is happening. Well, that's all I have for today. I wish every international student and foreign worker the best as you navigate all of these changes that Canada is making with regards to their immigration system.
So guys, we've come to the end of today's video, and I want to thank you very much if you took the time to go through it from the beginning to the end, or whether you went and came back, or even if you skipped some places. It doesn't really matter. The most important thing to me is that you got value and that you now understand, all the things, all the updates in the last few months from 2024 to 2025. You understand that Canada is making some changes to its immigration program. You understand that immigration is not actually closed in Canada. It's still open, just that Canada is streamlining it a bit. And from my heart, I feel for international students, foreign workers, spouses of international students. And as the year goes on, we're hoping to see a few more changes because it's the election year, but hopefully we're praying that everything will work out for you. So thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to also share this video with friends, especially those whom you know will benefit from it. Thank you again, and I'll see you in the next one.